Hello dear students of class 7, how are you all Student, I am a science teacher DPSF from LPM Public School Gola Bajar Gorakhpur. Student, as you know, chapter 11 that is reproduction plant is under process and today I will explain you about the fertilization and the different methods of dispersal of seeds. So student, let's start the chapter. Dear student, in my previous video, I have explained you about the pollination in which I have told you about there are two types of pollination. One is the self-pollination, other is the cross-pollination. Self-pollination occurs in the same flower of the male and female gamete from the male to the female gamete. Okay, student, and cross that took place between the male of one flower to female of other flower that is called the cross-pollination. Then after student, I have explained about the agents of pollination in which I have told you that there are various agents that act that are various means of pollination. One is the you can say bird, insect, animal, wind, and water that help in pollination. Now, student, they are called the pollinating agents. Okay, dear student. Now, let's talk about the pollination which I have explained you. Insects which feed on the nectar of the flower. The insects that come and sits on the sweet smelling flower to just collect the nectars from those flowers while due to the attraction of the color and odor of the flower when they sit on the flower the pollen from the anther stick to their body and get carried away with them to some other flower resulting in cross pollination. Some of the insects pollinated flower are student sunflower, marigold, jasmine, banana, and banyan. Dear student, these are the flower which gets pollinated by the help of insect because they are the colorful and good smelling flower because of the attraction of its color and you can say smell. The insects sits on them and then they transfer the pollen grain from the male part to the female part by the help of these insects, and these are called the insect pollinated plant. Next, dear student, some flowers of plants such as grass, maize, rice, sugarcane, bamboo, which have a small petals or no petals at all, use wind as a pollinating agent. Thus, do not produce nectar. The pollen grain from these plants are very light and thus they are blown away by wind very easily. Dear student, so these you can see the lightweight flower in which the pollen grain are very light and they are transferred by the help of the wind. Plant like Vallisneria and Hydrilla uses water for pollination. Okay, student, the seeds, the pollen grain falls in the water, and due to by the help of water, they gets pollinated. The flower from these plant release pollen grain in water, which are carried away by water current and to far away plants. Dear student, next come about the topic of the fertilization. Fertilization is the process of fusion of male and female gametes inside the ovule to form zygote. So, what is the process of fertilization means, student? So, when the male gamete transfers to female gamete, and when the male gamete fuses inside the female gamete, that is in the ovule, there is at that very moment start the formation of zygote. Means as soon as the male gamete enters the female gamete, at that moment there starts the formation of zygote. Okay, so when a pollen grain falls on the stigma of a flower, its outer wall burst to produce a pollen tube. So student, when a pollen grain falls on the stigma of the flower, its outer wall bursts to opens and the pollen tube which moves in downward direction. The pollen tube enters the stigma and passes through the style and enters the ovule. The male gametes moves to the ovule with the help of pollen tube and combines with the female gamete present in the ovule to form fertilized egg cell known as the zygote. So dear student, you can see here when a pollen grain falls on the stigma of a flower, its outer wall bursts to produce a pollen tube which moves in the downward direction. The pollen tube enters the stigma and passes through the style and enters into ovule. The male gamete moves to the ovule with the help of the pollen tube and combines with the female gamete present in ovule to form fertilized egg cell known as the zygote. Okay, dear student, zygote develops into an embryo and further this zygote develops into an embryo form. Embryo is that part of the seed which is ready to develop into a new plant. There may be more than one pollen tube pushing their way through the style and reach the egg cell. The one that find its ways first a chance to have its male gamete fusing with the egg cell means जो जिस पोलन ग्रेन को पहली कामयाबी मिलेगी, जो पोलन ग्रेन सबसे पहला पहला पोलन ट्यूब के थ्रू इंसर्ट होते हुए ओव्यूल के अंदर एग में प्रवेश कर जाएगा, उस पोलन ग्रेन को फर्स्ट प्रायोरिटी मिलेगी वह जायगोट बनाने के लिए. सो ओव्यूल फर्टिलाइज्ड एग्स एंड फॉर्म्स द जायगोट. ना फर्दर जायगोट डेवलप्स इनटू एम्ब्रायो, आगे चल के यही जायगोट एम्ब्रायो में कन्वर्ट हो जाता है. एम्ब्रायो इज दैट पार्ट ऑफ सीड, और एम्ब्रायो सीड का वह हिस्सा है जो धीरे धीरे एक न्यू प्लांट का शेप ले रहा है. दैट मीन्स फर्स्ट द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ zygote and then the formation of embryo. Embryo is that part of seed which develops into a new plant. There may be more than one pollen tubes pushing their ways to reach the egg cell. The one that find its way first to reach gets a chance to become a male gamete fusing with the egg cell. The other dries up and rest of the other pollen grains dries up because they are not able to enters the ovule as already the pollen grain priorly one pollen grain has entered which has made that egg fertilized. So rest of the pollen grain will destroy, dry up and fall off. With the wind, the pollen grain of any flower may fall on the stigma of any other flower. So, student, by taking the help of wind, the pollen grain of any flower may fall on the stigma of any other flower, but the pollen tube will be formed only at the pollen grain that belongs to the same species. That is why we do not see half rose and half jasmine flower, because it completes its circle in the formation of zygote, and that zygote forms the embryo. Now, student, let's see the further topic, formation of seed and fruit. Dear student, formation of seeds and fruit. After fertilization means, what do you mean of fertilization, student? When the pollen grain from anther enters into the ova of the ovule, okay, and this is called fertilization. The ovule transforms into zygote, then that ovule gets transformed to zygote, which is a single cell structure. This zygote then begins to divide, and this further the zygote begins to divide and forms a multicellular structure called embryo. Then this single zygote divides into a multicellular structure called embryo. The embryo means surrounded by one or two cotyledon. The embryo remains surrounded. Embryo, dear student. Dear student, the embryo remains surrounded by one or two cotyledon which stores food for the growing seedlings. When the seed germinates, ovule now become the seeds. At the same time, when ovule is going through the internal changes, its outer part forms a tough coating. When all internal and external changes are complete, the ovule becomes a seed. Once again, student, the embryo which has been formed after the formation of zygote, the embryo remains surrounded by one or two cotyledon, and these cotyledon are food storing for baby plant which stores food for the growing seedlings. When the seeds are about to germinate, at that moment the seeds requires the food, and that food are provided by the cotyledon. Ovule now becomes the seed. The ovule part converts slowly into the seed form. At the same time, when the ovule is going through the internal changing to form the seed, at the same moment the outer part forms a tough coating. When all the internal tough coating, that is the outer covering part or pulp, which becomes the pulp of fruit part, so when all the internal and the external changes are complete, the ovule becomes a seed and the ovary transforms into the upper skin or pulp region. Simultaneously, when the seeds are forming, many changes takes place. Simultaneously, when the seeds are forming, many changes are occurring, that is taking place in the flower itself. The petals and the stamens just fall down. The style and stigma also wither away. Only the sepals which usually falls away may remain in the same cases, like the tomato plant. But this time the ovary changes into fruit and the ovule changes into the seed. सो स्टूडेंट, फूलों के बाकी सारे विभिन्न अंग जैसे कि सेपल्स, पेटल्स, एज इवन द मेल स्टिग्मा, सॉरी, एंथर, फिलामेंट, ये सब गिर जाएंगे। केवल और केवल ओवरी और ओव्यूल का रूप परिवर्तित हो जाएगा। ओव्यूल जो है उसके अंदर का सीड फॉर्मेशन के रूप में कन्वर्ट हो जाएगा और ओवरी जो है उसके ऊपर का पल्प, गुद्दा और छिलका के रूप में, फ्रूट के रूप में कन्वर्ट हो जाएगा। और इस प्रकार केवल यही दो पार्ट फ्लावर के हैंगिंग रह जाएंगे, लटके रह जाएंगे पौधे से, बाकी सारे पार्ट विदर हो जाएंगे। ओके डियर स्टूडेंट, नाउ the fruit develops from ovary. Now it's okay. Yes, the fruits may be either dry or sorry student. So the sepals which usually falls, now by this time the ovary changes to fruit. The fruit develops from the ovary and contains a seed or seeds. So that fruit which has been formed after transformation from the ovary, this ovary contains seeds, either single seed or more than one seed is present inside the ovary. The fruit may be either dry or soft and juicy. The dry fruit may be in the form of pod like peas and beans, woody nuts like hazelnuts and almonds, also grains like wheat and oats. These are single cotyledon seeds. The soft and juicy fruits may contain the seed inside a woody skin, like in peaches and cherry. Means the soft and juicy fruits contain their seed inside a coating or skin like coating like peaches in and cherry. There may there other they may have many similar seeds as in tomato or in oranges. Now, student, my next topic about the dispersal of seeds. Dear student, what happen if there is too much poverty in a family and the family members are very high in number? Suppose that there is a single chapati and a mother and their four or five children. So a single chapati cannot fulfill the requirement of all the big family members, as because from the same single chapati they have to take their nourishment, which will not be enough for them for the nourishment. Same case means a mother plant whose seeds start developing in a new plant, so that new plant which is growing just by a side of a big mother plant, and mother plant feels very sorry for those baby plant because they can't do anything by their own. So the mother plant which is standing just by the side of that little small baby plant, the roots of the mother plant is very big. They will easily just absorb the water from the ground, but the new baby plant which is growing under that big tree will not be able to capable to take the water from the ground, because the water has already been taken by a big plant which is just near by that small plant. As even the from the outside upper regions, more and more carbon dioxide which is present, and the sunlight that is easily taken by the plant or tree which is bigger than compared to the smaller ones. So that's why the mother plant could see that how their baby plant dies after a few days due to starving of water, food, okay, sunlight. That's why the mother plant wants their baby seeds to be dispersed far away, where by side of those seeds there might not be any uh, such thing that would compete with that new baby born baby plant. मीन्स मदर पौधे चाहते हैं कि उनके उनकी पौधे में उगने वाले जो सीड्स हैं वो दूर दूर जाके गिरें, और ऐसी जगह गिरें जहाँ पे उसका कंपटीशन करने वाला कोई ना हो उसके अगल बगल। मतलब जैसे कि सपोज दैट कोई ऐसा बड़ा पेड़ ना हो जो कि अकेले नीचे के अंदर का ज़मीन के अंदर का सारा पानी वो अकेले खींच जा रहा है, इस छोटे पौधे को मौका ही नहीं मिल पा रहा। ऊपर से सारा सनलाइट और कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड अकेले वही खींच ले रहा है, उस छोटे पौधे को मौका नहीं मिल पा रहा। तो वो ऐसे कंडीशन में ग्रो हो जहाँ पे अगल बगल में उसका कोई कंपटीटर ना हो, तो फिर उसको सरवाइव करने में इजी होगी। तो डिस्पर्सल के कई तरीके हैं। पहला स्टूडेंट, डिस्पर्सल बाय विंड। कुछ सीड्स बहुत हल्के होते हैं, जैसे कि मदार के सीड्स वगैरह, ये बहुत हल्के होते हैं, जो हवा के तेज झोंके से वो सीड्स उड़ के दूर जाके धीरे धीरे ज़मीन पकड़ते हैं, और जैसे ही उसको उस सीड्स को वहाँ पे फेवरेबल क्लाइमेट मिलता है तो वो प्लांट का धीरे धीरे प्लांट का रूप लेने लगते हैं। डिस्पर्सल बाय वाटर, द सीड्स में ऑल्सो गेट कैरिड। कुछ सीड्स जो होते हैं वाटर के थ्रू भी कैरी होते हैं। वो सीड्स, वो पौधे जो समुद्र किनारे ग्रो करते हैं, कोकोनट, ये इसके जो फ्रूट्स जब पानी में गिरते हैं तो ये वाटर में फ्लोट होते हुए दूर निकल जाता है, और जहाँ कहीं टर्निंग होता है उस टर्निंग पे धीरे से वो किनारे पे चला जाता है, और वहाँ का सॉयल और जो फेवरेबल कंडीशन होता है उसके आधार पे वो फिर एक नया बेबी प्लांट को जन्म देता है। दैट इज़ डिस्पर्सल बाय वाटर। नेक्स्ट, डिस्पर्सल बाय एनिमल्स। कुछ ऐसे जानवर हैं जो किसी ऐसे पौधे को के सीड्स जो है उनके शरीर के बाल से या पूंछ के बाल से जकड़ जाएंगे, और जैसे जैसे वो ठुमक ठुमक के आगे चलता रहेगा उसके पूंछ से या उसके शरीर के बाल से वो जो ऐसे सीड हैं जो कांटेदार हैं वो उसमें उलझ जाएंगे, और फिर वो जब वो झड़ जाते हैं तो जहाँ पर भी जिस मिट्टी पे वो गिरता है वहाँ से एक नया प्लांट स्टार्ट करते हैं बनाना। ओके, तो ये है डिस्पर्सल बाय एनिमल्स। नाउ डिस्पर्सल बाय सेल्फ एक्सप्लोजन। कुछ ऐसे सीड्स भी होते हैं जो विस्फोटक के रूप में काफ़ी तेज़ फैलते हैं, इससे फटते हैं, जैसे कि मदार का जो फ्रूट होता है, हाँ, कॉटन प्लांट का, वो काफ़ी तेज़ ब्लास्ट करता है, जिससे उसके अंदर के सीड जो हैं काफ़ी दूर दूर जाके डिस्पर्स होकर गिरते हैं, और फिर वहाँ से नए प्लांट एराइज होते हैं। ओके डियर स्टूडेंट, तो ये तो हो गया डिस्पर्सल बाय सेल्फ एक्सप्लोजन। नाउ माय नेक्स्ट टॉपिक विल बी अबाउट डियर स्टूडेंट Germination of seed. How the seed germinate into a new baby plant. Germination is the process of growing of a plant from its seed. Student, what is the process of germination? Germination is the process of growth of a plant from its seed. The scattered seed need proper what the seed after dispersion. Okay, when the seeds get scattered, okay, those seeds need proper amount of moisture, air, temperature and soil to germinate. When these optimum condition, the seeds germinate to into a baby plant, and that helps to food stored in the seed. For germination to start, seeds undergo the changing in the following sequence. Is that finally, firstly the seeds absorb water. Next, water activities the enzymes of the seeds. Third, enzymes convert the stored food into a soluble form. Those enzymes that is present in the body that converts the stored food in the soluble form. This soluble food is used by the radicle and plumule for their body growth. For the radicle means radicle grows into the root and plumule goes into the shoot. Means the plant, baby plant that is coming out from the seed, the radicals is very you can say radical is used for the root purpose, further goes into root, and plumule further goes into the shoot. The first radical grow roots and this plumule pushes up to the form shot. After the leaves start appearing, the plant starts marking its own food through photosynthesis, making it food. When the plant become big enough, the leaves of this plant start preparing their food. Till then, we have to take care about the plant. Okay, students, today I have completed explaining chapter 7-11, that is reproduction plant. Meet you in the next lecture video. Till then, student, thank you. Have a nice day, student.